Hi everyone, it's Erin. It's February 2nd, 2017 already, and I have a letter here from Dylan Anderson, dated on January 19th. It says, "Hi Rudy and Erin, I'm writing back to all of those I like with this letter. Early in the morning of September 10th, 2006, I set out on a 3-day backpacking trip to a lake named Castle Lake in the high Uinta wilderness of Utah. This campfire story sounds like something out of a paperback novel, but it's as true as a story can be. It is a tale that cannot even come close to depicting how magical the event to come was. In the short version, and I could go on forever about it, branching off into different subjects. There was always something majestic about this place whenever I looked at it on the map. It is one of the highest elevation lakes in Utah. This is in Henry's Fork Basin, the route most people who hike Kings Peak, state's high point, go to make the summit. I headed out with my dog, Oscar, and didn't even get very far before I had to take a long break because I was in so much pain from my knees and was walking with a limp. I lay down in the dirt and used my boots as a pillow. Oscar nudged me, letting me know to take his pack off too. I felt lightheaded from too many pain pills. I did not care that ants crawled on me. It was a new low point in life for me, and I had so far to go. It began to rain. After sleeping on the ground like Rip Van Winkle under a dead pine tree, I continued down the trail. Would I even find what I was looking for? With few cars at the trailhead and people heading out to go home after a rainy weekend, there would be very few others in Henry's Fork, despite it being a popular destination, judging by the number of cars at the trailhead. It was to be clear skies from here on out. After a long day with many ups and downs, I arrived at the basin. All at once, Kings Peak and half a dozen other of Utah's 13,000-foot peaks appeared as I walked out into the open. If I had only known at the time, as I staggered along, that in the years soon to come, I would summit every single one of them. Being adventurous, I began to trailblaze in the dark, following my GPS to get to Bear Lake. I had a great time camping around the fire that night and left my worries behind. I slept like a baby under the stars. In the morning, I moved up the trail painfully slow towards my final destination, Castle Lake. I made my way far up above the tree line. As I made my approach, I could hear chirping bird echoes coming off the cliff face of Mount Powell's crested butte. I set up camp next to a giant flat boulder that I planned to lay on above the fire and stargaze that night. There were steep mountain sides and cliffs all around, and the landscape was bald with occasional stunted pine trees. Sound bounced off the nearby rock face as if it was in an amphitheater. There was a moonrise that illuminated the whole valley in a short period. Coyotes howled at the moon. I even had time to catch an unexpected brook trout before it got dark. I made a large fire and used the most primitive way there is to cook the fish, setting it on a rock next to the fire. I threw a huge tree stump in the fire and it became a small bonfire. I have long loved to lay down on my back at night facing the heavens, with all the stars and planets shooting stars. Gun Sight Pass was in sight a few miles away in the form of a giant V in between two 13,000-foot peaks. Searching for pine wood, I heard what I assumed was a plane flying in the distance. I went about wood gathering as the sound grew louder and more intense. Whatever I was hearing was quickly becoming overwhelming. I could not tell where the sound was coming from. The only explanation was that it was a rock slide. The sound grew even louder, and I couldn't tell where it was coming from. My next thought was that perhaps a rescue helicopter was coming through. Suddenly, my surroundings lit up, drowning out the light from the moon and the fire. Shadows were cast that were elongated and moving off to the side. A smooth, vibrating sound consumed me. I saw my own shadow at night. I felt wired. Déjà vu ensued. As if someone had just said, "Quick, turn around or you'll miss it." I already knew what was coming in my direction. I turned around as fast as I could to see it coming towards and past overhead. Not 2 blocks away and 500 feet up, that is when I beheld a burning ball of fire, a runaway meteor fireball. Time held still. I remember every detail. It had the most brilliant white flames encircling a boulder. It rotated and distinctly tumbled, hurling through the air at supersonic speed. Not a flare of light like an ordinary shooting star, but a 3-dimensional, tight-blazing, burning ball of fire around a soccer ball-sized rock, pitch black at its core. It changed to look as if it were a burning marshmallow. And oh my, the blue tail, a mile long or more. Like the afterburn of a fighter jet, I had to turn my head to see it all. The trail directly behind the fireball turned to red sparks, and it made hissing sound as the fireball went out. Now in dark flight, flinging dark red debris and nearly impacting the nearby cliff face. I heard the echo of it extinguishing out as the temperamental blue afterburn quickly faded, leaving only red sparks and dust floating overhead. Either my ears were playing tricks on me, or I had heard an impact from where it would impact. Flat Top Mountain. I could not help but notice the trail appeared to have come from the direction of Gunsight Pass, and the altitude of the meteor was low enough that it most likely came barreling below the 2 peaks that are above the pass. The gun sight I watched for perhaps another 30 seconds until the last red spark went out. I made a wish. I made good time in getting home, but my story didn't add up to my dad when I told him about my experience over the phone. How did I hear something traveling faster than the speed of sound before the arrival of the runaway meteor had even shown up? My dad was too polite to say that, but I, too, didn't understand. He mentioned that he saw a meteor too last night. I just thought he was downplaying my experience. I later did my research and found that what is known to be mankiind's longest unexplained natural astronomical phenomenon is something called electrophonic meteors. Some meteors produce radio waves that move faster than the speed of light and turn into sound when they arrive to the surface, creating a variety of possible electrophonic sounds. I did online research and found that there was a person in Crested Butte, Colorado, who saw a bright white meteor heading my direction. There was also a person in America Fork, Utah, who saw a multicolored meteor that just kept going and turned to white. This was all part of a meteor bolide that broke into 2 pieces, sending one of the pieces at me, and the other went above America Fork, Utah. On July 7th, Oscar and I embarked on our drive to go on a backpacking trip to go live life elevated in wilderness with no deadline to come back, with the mission to recover the fallen star. How in the world did I, without knowing, plan my trip on 777? I had bought a fine metal detector and powerful magnets because most all meteorites are ferrous. I set out 11:30 at night so that my journey would start on 777. I used a shovel as a walking stick. I had doubled the name for myself, Meteor Explorer. I dubbed that name. I hiked all night, and in the morning I was walking up Flat Top Mountain. It was an amazing view of all the peaks surrounding King's Peak. I strolled along at 12,000 feet of elevation. It had been a heavy year for snowfall. This shaded mountainside fate had brought me to had glaciers that are there year-round. I slid down a huge snowdrift from 12,000 to 11,500 feet to set up my camp. I saw mountain goats on Mount Powell's crested butte. There was such a variety of different terrain: boulder piles, grassy hills, green meadows, solid rock cliffs up high. I started my search at 11,600 feet. From my research, without a doubt, that was a nice size, very valuable small boulder of meteorite somewhere, whether underground, under a bush, or broken against a giant rock just lying on the ground in pieces, or some other scenario. For a meteor to maintain such a great speed for so long to such a low altitude, making a powerful fireball and electrophonic sound, it had to be a nice-sized rock. I planned to name it the King's Peak meteorite. Meteorites are named after a nearby landmark. I would actually close one eye and gaze at the gun sight to help myself estimate where I think the black meteor impacted. I looked all over for a crater or broken piece of space rock. I never saw any one day after day. I was a wild man, obsessed to find what turned out to be a needle in a haystack. Or was there a crater somewhere just a little outside my search area? It was very much a possibility to find it any time, or never at all. I gave up, but the fire inside me kept saying, what if I were higher up the mountain or more to one side of Flat Top Mountain? I came back from time to time over the years. In 2011, I tried my luck yet once again. I decided to check an area at 11,900 feet where it was solid rock just in case it had impacted higher than I could estimate and it was broken in pieces just waiting for me. Where a glacier had covered the ground some other years, I crawled up what was left of Glacier End, up near the top of Flat Top, and all the way up to Mount Powell's crested butte. A cloud covered the butte's top near where the meteor actually almost impacted the cliffs while still on fire. There was a cloud covering the mountaintop. Mountain goats scaled the cliff below. God had given me my wish, that my hiking exploration would grow greater. I submitted more mountains than I could remember. It never really had much meaning to me, the date that I witnessed the runaway King's Peak meteor, until I was in jail in Portland, Oregon, for defying the most powerful enemies of freedom. The date which the fallen star came down was indeed September 11th, 2006, Patriot Day or New World Order Day, depending on whether you took the red pill or the blue pill. On April 20th, 2016, my pre-trial release hearing day, my father and my stepmother drove up to be there to bring me home if I were let out. My father brought a new suit. The judge was so close on going either way that I think my dad's new suit tipped the scale that the judge decided to let me go. As I drove home, I told my dad that the red, white, and blue meteor had a different meaning now. He told me yet again that he had seen a meteor that same very night. I told him what time his fragment would have been headed above American Fork, Utah, where lives, from southeast to west, and that it would have to be 10:28 at night. He said, "That sounds right. I told you when you called and told me about your shooting star that I saw one the very same night." My father may testify at my trial. And that's the end. Thanks for listening. Good night.